technology. We good, Robert? Let's call this meeting to order. Robert, you want to take the roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Polito,
Here.
Vice Chair Lee, he will be here. Member Conway, excused. Member Walker,
Here.
Member Patel,
Here.
Mayor Wiest, here, and Vice Mayor Whitmer is excused.
All right, I see we have members of the public. I'll open it up to any public comments. All right, we'll move on to the item number 3, the draft minutes from the last meeting. I presume you all had a chance to read through them. I didn't find anything incorrect myself. No? Look good?
Good. Fine.
And
Move to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're making rapid progress for you. So now Paula Cohn is here, an annual event for us where she comes in and tells us whether we're going to have more money or less money.
What?
It's been she got a long run of positive news.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you hired me 8 years ago, which was the year that you actually went down in value, and you were going, what the heck's going on? We're always going up, up, up. And it was the year when, during the recession, the assessors started putting or removing value for Prop 8, so there was a logical explanation for that. But at any rate, I'm going to talk about 18-19. It's the information that you're getting your current year's revenue on. In order for something to have shown up on this roll, it happened in calendar year 2017. So as we go through, you'll see a lot of sales transactions that you enjoyed in 2017 for a lot of money that resulted in the increases that we're seeing. I think you've all got a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. The first slide that I've got is a 20-year history, small letters, that's why you've got your own copy. 20-year history of the values in the town of Atherton. And you continue to grow. This is the 8th year that you've had positive growth after that 1 year of a slight reduction. The average annual growth per year, if I go back and do an average of these past 20 years, has been 8.47%. So I'm not telling you to budget 8% every year, but if I go back and look and average in those really positive years with the other years that you've got, it's an 8.47%. The year-over-year growth this year was $721 million. It was a little more than a 7% increase this year. And your current values for 18-19 are 74% higher than they were at that bubble before we started the recession. So you have certainly come back and exceeded that by 74%.
What do you define exactly as the recession?
For you folks, it started in 2010-11. That was the year that the town did not see a positive change in value between 2009-10 and 10-11. It was actually a slight negative change. That was also the year, just to digress a little bit, for Prop 13, properties can increase a maximum of 2% of the CPI, whichever is less. In 2010-11, the CPI was actually less than 2%. It was a negative 1.37%. And that's part of the reason that we're also seeing a decline in value is that we did not get a 2% change that year. As I look at your past 8 years, and I'm looking now forward to 1920 and beyond, your future year growth is going to be tied to properties that's selling, properties that are being, in your community, purchased, demolished, and rebuilt, and then the CPI that will be granted. The next slide shows just the 5-year history of the value, and it's looking at this just a little differently in a little more detail. Again, the year-over-year growth, 721,068,612. The real estate recovery and increasing home prices have been the primary drivers of your growth between the past 2 years. And I'm seeing similar growth in a lot of the communities in San Mateo County, and I have a couple of slides in a minute that's going to show some comparative information. To be honest, San Mateo County is doing slightly better than Santa Clara County in many respects, because Santa Clara County started a little higher and hasn't been able to see the same bumps that we're seeing in the communities that we're seeing in San Mateo County. The town's weighted 1% share, and this information is in the book rather than being in the slides, is a little more than 8 cents of every tax dollar is what the town manages to hold on to. And if I look at this $721 million change or increase in value and quantify what kind of increase in revenue that is equivalent to, it's an increase of $601,259 more revenue this year than you had last year due to this growth. The Budget Act of State Budget Act 2004-5 changed the way that VLF was allocated. It was then allocated based on what you're receiving in 2004-5, and it grows by your year-over-year growth. Again, that grew the same 7% that the city grew, and as a result, your VLF in lieu is going to grow by $77,874 estimated. So if I sum those two together, it looks like your year-over-year revenue increase is about $679,000 more than you got last year in property tax related revenue.
Remind me what VLF in lieu is.
Well, you pay a license fee to register your vehicle. Before 2004-5, that was distributed to cities based on population. Arnold Schwarzenegger got elected. The first thing he did was issue recovery bonds in order to fix the budget deficit. And when he did that, he shifted two things. One was sales tax, you don't have a whole lot of that, and the other was VLF in lieu. And the VLF in lieu, he said, what were cities getting in 2004-5? We're going to slot that right over into the city, and from this point on, it's going to grow by the value change, no longer by population change. When you look back at things, you don't get a big population bump year over year, but your values are growing 7 or 8%. So I don't think the consequence was what the governor intended it was going to be when he decided this was going to be the new way of distributing VLF. So it is in lieu of that former way of distributing
But
revenue.
in terms of budget, it's just buried in property tax revenue.
And you may have a line item
We
that's
have,
separate.
we have a line item that's separate, but it totals up to total property taxes, but there's a vehicle in lieu fee, so that we get property taxes in lieu of those vehicle license fees.
And it doesn't, it's not calculated in terms of your 1% share. It grows by population, so it's got a different dynamic in the way it increases year over year. Past 2 years, you've had greater than 7% and are outpacing the county slightly. Looking at how your values broke down year over year, your residential uses in town grew 705 million of the 721. So roughly 97.8% of all the growth in town came from residential uses. No surprise there, you're heavily residential use in the community. They're increasing largely due to sales of current property, redevelopment, and a little our sense, developing property that was formerly something else into something bigger and better. And vacant uses grew $2 million, although there were 3 fewer properties, and I'm going to show you one of those vacant uses in just a minute. Prior to this year, we purchased third-party information from DataQuick, and DataQuick would only update use codes every 5th or 7th year, depending on the county. So I had a lot of use codes that were stale, or they were just vacant, and they weren't really vacant. And one of the questions that you folks have had over past, we had one parcel that was a dry farm. You know, where is a dry farm? And now it has been changed to an agricultural use. It is the Menlo Circus Club property at 190 Park Lane, and it's valued at $98,068. So that use is now agricultural, a lot of grounds for horses and other uses. To look at the top value changes, and we do a top 40, all 40 of the top deviations were positive, we had no negatives on that. And if I look at all of them, none of them increased less than $4 million year over year. The largest increase was on a residential site owned by Shen Wei at 65 Inglewood Lane. It increased $14.3 million. It was property that was purchased, demolished, rebuilt, and the increase in all of that activity in the property shown there is the $14.3 million reported. The second largest increase was an increase of $13.6 million on a property on Tuscaloosa Avenue owned by Moon Clover Limited. That property was purchased in 2017 for $26 million. And the third largest was, again, residential property at 8 Faxon Forest owned by Apollo Chamber Orchestra LLC. It increased $12.3 million. Again, that property sold in 2017 for $17.1 million. The next two that I looked at, one was a residential property owned by John James Veronius Jr. at 220 Park Lane. That property increased $12.3 million. Although we show the last transfer of ownership in 1997, it really hasn't sold since 1977. It was interfamily deeding of property, so it did not get reappraised. The taxable value of that property before the sale for taxation was $270,777, and it sold for $12.4 million. And then the final one that I looked at in the top 5 was also single-family home at 52 Atherton, owned by Queen Wise Company LLC, increased $12.2 million, sold for $17,250,000 in 2017. There were a number of properties that were selling for just under $20,000 last year.
20 million?
I'm sorry, 20 million. Did I say 20,000? I wish. And in order for the town of Atherton to increase its revenue 1%, I have to find, or we have to find $109 million in new value added to your bottom line. That's because you've got $10.9 billion total in the city. We take 1% of that, and that is equivalent of $109 million. So as like I go through and start looking towards 1920, I'm looking at sales transactions at 2% CPI, and anything else that I can find in multiples of that $109 million to move us up 1%.
A quick question?
Yeah.
So, do we have data with respect to ownership of residential properties that includes when it was purchased and the age of the residents? Because that makes a big difference.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been doing this work since 1990. So I have information that I started buying that third-party data quick at that point, and I would track the last sale on the record. So in many cases that was 1960, in some cases that was 1990, depending on what the records were. So we're able to go back at this point, since I've been doing it almost 30 years, to look at when the last sale was on property. We call it a valid sale, and that's when it goes from Mr. Jones to Mr. Smith. Instead of Mr. Jones, who's now deceased, to his wife, which is a quitclaim deed, she deceases, and it goes to a daughter. And all of that, it's transferring, but it's not being reappraised per Prop 13. So we look at a full value sale and what's called a non-moneyed sale when it's going to a different party within the same family and not being reappraised. So we do see a lot more of these properties that have been held in the families for the past 40 or 50 years finally being sold. And whether it's because the individuals who formerly owned it are no longer alive and their heirs either can't afford to pay the property taxes on a $15, $17 million piece of property, or they decide they're going to sell it and buy something where they can't afford it. Yeah.
Paul, is there a impact on the way the property owner holds the property? There are a lot of LLCs in town in terms of sales and transactions.
No, property is taxed the same way, and if the split roll goes through in November 2020, it's not going to apply to any residential property, whether it's rented or not rented. Mm-hmm. So that for the most part, you will be immune to any of that nonsense, whatever happens with that. We do track properties in trusts, and there was a big feeling that if you had a lot of these pre-Prop 13 properties in trusts, that maybe they never sell. And I think in most of the counties that we're looking at this, it's under 15% now of properties that are still in that pre-Prop 13 pool. And of those, it's somewhere around 60% are in trusts. So there's a high percentage of that, and that's because people are trying to shelter their assets and not have to go through probate, and putting it in a trust with the direction of that, particularly if you've got under the limit, the 5 or 7, whatever the individual inheritance limit is, that helps shelter some of the capital gains on this property when it goes from one family member to another. So, we certainly can provide that. You've got a small enough database that we can provide it if you're interested in it. And we can certainly give you, we have a report that shows when the last sale was, how many properties back in 1970 had not sold, and then as we come forward in time, how many of those still have not sold as we come forward, or how many of them sell out.
So you could compute the average length of holding of a residential property.
Yeah, we can do that.
But that was my first question. The second part of the question was the age of the person who is living in the house.
Can't do that.
Sounds pretty discriminatory.
It's relevant to whether they're going to sell or not.
Right, we get that all the time. Can you tell me how many senior citizens we have? Well, not even in a loan document do I think it's required, if I could get a loan document, but I don't think it's required that the age of the individual be publicly disclosed. So we have no way of knowing the age of the people of property. The report that's also in your book, again, I just mentioned the top 40 value changes are shown here. How many, again, that none of them are less than $4 million. And there is one vacant property within this listing that's owned by Westside Park Place at 233 Park Lane. And I'm showing you a photo of that because that property was newly purchased and they paid $15.8 million for a vacant lot in their community.
Not that good a street.
Yeah. So it may have something on it by now, I don't know. But according to Google, that's what it looks like.
Was it more than an acre then?
I don't
Several
recall.
acres.
I don't recall. It looks bigger than an acre, but I'm not sure what it is.
These are calendar year transactions, but property taxes are paid on a fiscal
On a
year.
fiscal year, but they are lean on January 1 to be taxed, or tax bills going up the following September. So there's a big delay for
They
the
get it
revenue
summer.
stream you receive, yeah. A little bit of a view of your median sale prices. When I was here last year and we were looking at a report like this, your median prices at my visit, which I think was maybe in November or December last year, those were up 15% when I came through the door. And then as the balance of the year went through, we had properties that were actually selling for less than they were when I came out, and we ended up with a negative 14% year-over-year median sale price. And all that means is as we went through the balance of the year, the properties that were coming to market were lower value than those that we were seeing in the first part of the year. And ultimately, they actually, as a median, that middle home, half selling for more, half selling for less, were about 14-point-something% less than they were in the prior year. That said, in the first 8 months of 2018, the median prices are up 42.86%. I'm guessing there's going to be some moderating of that as you go through the year, but that's a huge increase year over year in terms of the sale price. Last year, the median price was 5.075 million, and this year it's $7.2 million. So clearly a $2 million increase in those median prices. As a comparison, go back. Okay. This report gives you a 10-year history of sales transactions. It's broken into 3 blocks. The left 1/3 looks at the single-family homes that are selling. The middle is anything that isn't single-family, and for the town of Atherton, that's typically vacant. And the right are totals. And looking at the first 8 months of the year, and that's underneath the date that says January through there have been 53 single-family homes that have sold this year. Last year, there were 100 for the full year. So we are seeing actually fewer properties statewide come to market this year than we saw last year. Again, availability is the issue. The price on, or the value on the roll of those homes that sold was slightly more than $287.8 million. They sold for $484.7 million, which is an increase of 68% when they're selling. Last year, for the entire year, they almost more than doubled, and the year before that, they more than doubled when they sold. Again, we don't have the full year on that. We only had one other property that sold, and it sold for exactly what the value was. Again, I'm assuming that was a vacant piece of property that was sold for $3.6 million. And as we get to the end of the comparison totals, 54 properties have sold, and on the far right, the dollar change is $169 million. And I commented that you needed $109 million to move you up 1 percentage point. This is the equivalent of 1.8%. Again, we're not all the way through the year. We're going to see a 2% CPI next year. That plus this is 3.8%, roughly half of what you saw last year. No construction is included here, and the sales aren't for the full part of the year. And we'll look at what I'm estimating in just a minute. The comparison of Atherton to every city in San Mateo County, and this is what you'll enjoy. We're looking at the year that each city saw their peak price, what that price was, and what the current price is. And then the far column is the percent you are in comparison to that peak price. And so in your case, you are more than 80% higher than you were in the peak of the bubble. The city with the largest growth is Menlo Park. And again, its peak price was 1.3 million. It is now 2.8. So they started lower, and we've seen a huge increase. In that current median price column, only 2 cities in this county have a current median price that is less than $1 million, and Colma is at 990. So it's in all likelihood they're going to cross over sometime this year, leaving only East Palo Alto at 975. Could happen there too.
So our peak median was clear back in the dot-com bubble of 2000?
Yeah. And again, a median sale price is a better indication of what's coming to market that year than anything else. So if a lot of high dollar homes came to market in 2000, and in 2001, the homes that came to market weren't as high priced, they're going to be lower. If that's correct.
So we're doing better than Hillsborough, Portola Valley,
It appears.
Woodside, right?
Yeah, it appears. I was going to bring that up, but you already did that. Yeah. Those are the cities you compared yourself with?
No,
No.
no comparison.
No. Okay. All right, and the final trend that I want to show you again looks at all the North Bay counties. This is only a June 2017 as compared to June 2018. There have been fewer properties again coming to market. 17.85% less properties came to market in that month comparison of those 2 years. If you look at Santa Clara, it's a negative 18. San Francisco, a negative 7. Contra Costa, negative 21. So everybody is seeing a slowdown in the properties coming to market. However, if you look at the dollar change in comparison of those 2 months, everyone except for Marin County, and again, Marin County probably had higher properties come to market last year than this year. It's pretty flat, but prices here in the entire county are up 12.5%. Santa Clara County, they're up 25%. Looking into budgeting, this is the good news. The CPI is currently exceeding 2%. It will be 2% because it's an October to October view. You have only 33 homes that still are in that Prop 8 pool that are being reviewed. The amount that's outstanding on those is not a factor to consider. It's not going to bump you up anything at all. With the first 8 months of sales, we've just looked at that and have seen that the equivalent would be 1.8%. I think you're probably gonna see that increase to between 2 and 2.5% by the time we get to the end of December. And at this point, we're looking at a minimum of 3.8 before, again, the end of the sales and new construction. What I want to talk with you about is we send an email in February to Robert so we can download our spreadsheet on budgeting. And I've done some work for East Bay Park and Rec and some major special districts that serve a lot of communities where they can't go to the city halls, all the city halls, and say, can you tell me what new construction you've got going on? They'll tell them, don't bother us with this. So I've started looking at the elements that drive your growth, and one of those elements are properties that did not sell, did not have an appeal pending, but the improvement values grew more than the CPI, grew more than 2%. So if I've got a piece of property where the improvement values grew 15%, I'm assuming something got built out there, that there's no other reason for improvement values to grow if it doesn't sell or isn't an appeal that's getting replaced. So looking at that in your community, in 2017, 16, and 15, you had $93 million in 17, $88 million in 16, and $98 million in 2015. And on an average, that's about $94 million. And so we can look at this as a piece of the puzzle to plot into a square that Robert has to add to your overall growth. I think if you leave that information out of the equation, you're going to have an extremely conservative budget, and that's fine. If you're conservative, rock with it and go with it. But if you want to get a little bit closer to the mark, I think we can help you by giving you a 5-year tally, dropping the high and low, and then we can tell you if you take 50% of the average of the other three, you're going to get this number, 70%, 90%. And if you go to your building officials and ask them, did we issue more building permits or less building permits than the prior year, they're going to be able to quantify that. Yes, we did 3 times as much. You're going to know which of those numbers is going to help you out. And I think, as with all of our budget forecasting tools, they are discussion pieces. We suggest that you call us with questions and we talk about this. But I think we're going to help you get a little closer to that this year. So when I add that element in, I'm estimating right now 4.5 to 5% growth for next year. A little bit less than you had this year, and I think that because of the number of properties that are selling, that is legit. However, if we start looking at your new construction, and I drove around this, so building that in the community, it may actually trend a little higher than that.
I mean, certainly just on an anecdotal basis, in Lindenwood, there's way more tear downs and new construction this year than last year.
And I drove around, there are a lot of for sale signs in this community as well. So if properties are continuing to turn over for $17 million a pop, it doesn't take too many of those to move you up a percentage point.
Yeah, but we have the lowest number of sales we've had in a long, long time.
True.
What triggers is when the building department closes out a building permit, do they notify the county?
They're supposed to. When they issue a certificate of occupancy, they should notify the county. When the building permit is taken out, the county knows that, the county gets that and knows that that's in the works. But they may do only a progress appraisal that first year. If they go out and see that the foundation is laid, that some of the walls are up, it's not completed, they'll do a progress appraisal of the work in progress, and then come back after the certificate of occupancy.
Does that certificate of occupancy apply to additions too?
Yes.
So that always triggers what
Yeah.
triggers.
Any other questions? One thing that is not included in some of our information is your excess ERAF contribution that's coming back to you, Robert. And we understand that you're getting it, but it is a calculation that has to be recalibrated every year, and we don't have all the pieces to it. I've asked San Mateo, because they have a list of all the cities and the amounts they get back.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to do an averaging of that over a couple of years and see if we can't plug in a number that's going to come back to you. as part of our revenue line.
We know it's being taken away.
Yeah, we
Yes,
know it's
they
been
tell
taken
us.
away, and the first call on that is your BLF and root, that's the pot it comes out of. And we find that most communities are contributing less than they're getting back in BLF, that's not your case because your population's so low. So you're contributing more than you're getting back. And I did put my business cards out, we moved, new phone number, new address, same old website. Any other questions? So you've got my phone number, if you need to call me, do not hesitate.
Thank you very much.
That was great, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much,
You
Paul.
might want to leave before the bad news starts.
Yes, sir.
I actually have a question for him. I'll call you. I'll call
Okay.
I have to laugh a little bit because I grew up in a town called Gladstone, Missouri, and all those numbers would probably be missing 4 zeros in the same,
On the report?
the same, the same report to the town council. Okay, property taxes. Robert, do you want to kick this off?
The property taxes or?
No, CalPERS, right?
Excuse me, CalPERS. I didn't ratchet forward, I stayed, the ratchet failed, I stayed in place. The CalPERS report, you wanna?
Yeah, just before you, just a review and discussion of our CalPERS actuarial reports as of June 30th, 2017. Discuss the pension rate assumptions and discussions of, for discussing of paying down liabilities and future review of our pension liabilities. So within the staff report, I've kind of highlighted some items. That one, we've been reviewing the actuarial reports the last couple of years. As you all recall, there were some changes that were done. There were some rate smoothing policies, changes in actuarial assumptions, risk volatility changes due to some investments, and also demographic changes. So a lot of this changed new asset allocations. But I think the most notable thing that we've noticed is the discount rate. We've had discussions over the years, what would the discount rate, what would the pensions be if discount rate changed? So in 2016, y'all recall, CalPERS decided to make the assumption changes to the discount rate. So beginning with that, with the June 30th, 2016 valuation report, which we reviewed last year, the discount rate went from 7.5% to 7.375%. And then in this evaluation report, it went from 7 to 7.25%. And next year's valuation report as of June 30th, 2018, we'll get that next year. The discount rate will be at 7%. So I kind of, in the staff report, just kind of listed some additional findings, some information. There were some changes to the actuarial assumptions in 2017. So this included retirement rates, termination rates, mortality rates, salary rates, and inflation. These assumptions are included in the actuarial reports and impact the fiscal year 1920 rates. Because of the change in the discount rate, there's a new change in the asset mix within our actuarial reports. And again, there was a reduction in inflation and assumption. Also, there was a new amortization policy that will be in effect in the June 30th, 2019 valuations. It shortens the amortization period from 30 to 20 years, as you recall in the rate smoothing policy that was enacted a couple years ago in 2015. It was for 30 years. Now it's to 20 years. They removed that 5-year ramp up and ramp down, and now it's just a ramp up that we're currently in. We're in that phase of the ramp up.
Robert, does it make sense to begin this annual ritual with a? Were you here last year when we talked about
Yes.
this?
Yeah.
Okay, you both of you.
Yeah.
So you remember the implications of what happens when the interest rate, the discount rate, goes down. The impact to the city. Okay.
Yeah. No, and
So I'm
I'm
sure we
just
don't.
gonna just highlight those items, just the assumptions, but kind of go over what's in the staff reports, what was included in actual evaluation reports. I just wanted to kind of summarize it from the valuation reports to the staff report. So if we want to look, for instance, on the miscellaneous employer rate contributions For 1920, the rate is gonna be 10.327%. Currently, it's 9.0635%. The UAL payment is at $295,438. The current UAL was $238,000 in fiscal year 18-19. And so in fiscal year 19-20, it will increase to $295,000. So just kind of going over that. So it's an increase of $64,902 over our current year. As a result of the valuation, we are at 75.7% funded. That's our funded status for the miscellaneous employees with an unfunded liability of $4.3 million.
Robert, just
Yes.
for information, so the normal cost percentage, that's the percentage of payroll that we pay into a retirement program. The town does not participate in Social Security, so we don't also have a 6.2% that we would pay. We don't pay any of that because the pension program replaces the Social Security program.
Correct. Yes. So we don't have that. So, and again, just kind of reiterate that this is for the miscellaneous plan component. For the public safety, as you can see in 1920 on page 3 of the staff report, the normal cost is 23.65%. Currently, it is 22.346% for fiscal year 18-19. So there's an increase of next year will be 1.038%. The UAL payment is going to increase to $771,853 from the current UAL payment of $605,433. So next year it's an increase of $166,420. Right now the safety plan is 72.5% funded, and the unfunded liability of $11.3 million. Just wanted to kind of show on page 3 in the bottom of the staff report, there's what we have contributed over the years. So again, George alluded to, there's that normal cost that we contribute to the pension plan. That's the percentage that we contribute to based on payroll. And then there's the UAL payment that was enacted in fiscal year 15-16. So as you can see, for fiscal year 12-13, we paid a total of $1.6 million. And 13-14, it was $876,000, and that was just the normal cost contribution. 14-15, it was $904,000, and 15-16, it increased to $1,086,000. And the reason for that is the UAL payment began, and you can see that the total was $442,000 in fiscal year 15-16, and the normal cost contribution as a percentage of payroll was $644,000. And you can see in 16-17 that in the normal cost went from $644,000 to $608,000, and then the UIL was $529,000 for a total of $1.1 million. So you can see that there's some over years. There's a reduction in the normal cost contribution with the rates, and you'll see the UAL payment increase over years. So 17-18. The UAL payment was $657,000. Of that amount, $777,000 was miscellaneous employees. Public safety employees was $480,000 for a total of $657,860. If you look at the normal cost contribution above at 17-18, it was $172,000 for miscellaneous employees, $407,000 for public safety, for a total of $579,929. So as of 17-18, the grand total was $1.2 million, including the UAL payment and the normal cost.
I just wanted to comment, I'm not entirely sure how valuable it is for you to read all those numbers.
No, I'm just showing it, I'm
2 minutes
sorry.
straight. Okay.
But no,
I just want to tell you.
yeah.
Sorry, just trying to keep it real.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So I just want to kind of that was going to be my read-in as far as kind of showing you what we've contributed and where we're at based on these reports. So if you can see, if we want to look at how the investment scenario changes, what Shirley had mentioned earlier, the UAL payment, if you look at page 5 of the staff report, it kind of tells you what would happen if the projected assumption for the discount rate, if it changed. Right now, at 7%, it kind of shows you the amount of what the UAL, the normal cost would be. So for miscellaneous, it's 11%, and UAL contribution is 336,000. So you kind of see how it can fluctuate as far as the normal cost contributions and the UAL. And as for public safety, you can see the different changes between 1% to 12% as far as the investment returns for the CalPERS discount rate.
Robert, the CalPERS funding horizon is an investment strategy, is a long-term
Yes.
thing. So the 20-year funding horizon that they changed to, that was in 2016 or 2017?
It's
2017, I think.
It's 2017.
So are they projecting that if they earn their 7% return by 2037, the town's UAL would be 0?
They're assuming that it could be 0.
But they're barring any
change.
increases in census population,
Right,
pay,
demographics.
demographics, mortality rates, things like that. That could also impact that.
That can also impact that, correct. And in the actuarial valuation reports, when they came up with the valuations, they did not know what the investment return was at that time when they computed these valuation reports, so it was assumed at 7.5%. Well, the 17-18 reports came in, the investment, and it was 8.6% was the investment return as of the 17-18 fiscal year. In the reports, again, it was assumed at 7.235 or 7.375 was the assumption in there. So that will change in the next valuation report. They will include that 8.6% in what was realized to calculate the future rates for 2021.
Means that since it was exceeding, the projection will be lower?
It could be the discount, because it came in higher, the normal cost could be lower and the UAL payment can be lower as well.
But they have that return scenario tables in there, so we can
Right.
kind of estimate based on that.
Yeah, and that's what, on that page 5 of the staff report, correct. There's how the investment come in each year. We can see how it will change. One, the normal cost rate and the UAL payment. So an additional thing wanted to show was when they made the changes of the discount rate, they kind of gave us how the normal cost would increase based on that rate and the UAL payment. And so on page 6 of the staff report, you can see we kind of did a calculation of what would that include to our rates. What would that mean to our rates? So in 2021, for example, the miscellaneous employees, the normal cost rate is 11%. Well, if the adjustment factor increased by 1%, based on the chart, it was between 1 and 3%. If we increase the normal rate cost by 1% in the first year, our normal cost rate in payroll would be 12%. The UAL adjustment factor was 5%, so if we estimated that against the current 336,000, it would be 352,000. So with the miscellaneous employees, by 2024, the UAL payment would be 579,000, and the UAL factor would be 13%. I mean, the normal cost would be 13%. And if you look at the public safety, that's probably the one that has more, where it has the costs are higher. It's 918,000 in 2020-21. If we project the estimated cost of adjustment factors, it would be 1.49 million in 24-25. Another thing that I wanted to point out is in fiscal year 16-17, we're allowed, the agencies are allowed to pass on an additional percentage of the employer normal cost rate, and we enacted that for the public safety component, and that was 1%. And in the staff report, it was listed that the maximum could be 3% for public safety and 1% for miscellaneous. So since we've enacted that, it's only been for public safety through 17-18 and 18-19. For 17-18, we've saved $68,000. In 18-19, we just added that additional 1% to make it 3% passed down to the public safety employee.
So the public safety employers are paying 3% of the employer's cost.
Of the employer's cost.
And local miscellaneous employers are paying 1% of the employer's cost.
Correct. So we passed on the maximum that we could on additional of the employer cost to the employees. And back in 2012, the town was paying the employee contribution portion as well. We passed that on years ago to the employees. So that was 7% for the miscellaneous employees and 9% for public safety employees.
So that employer rate of 11% is actually more like 10
Yes.
for local miscellaneous.
And how does that compare, especially on the public safety employees, how does that compare to competing municipalities? I mean, are they all headed in that direction, or are we going to lose people because they say, well, I don't have to pay as much toward my benefits if I go to Hillsborough or whatever, pick some other town?
I think that there's opportunity for attrition because of that. Some agencies still have higher plans. Some have 3% at 2.5% at 55. Some have 2.7%. Some agencies do, not all agencies. And some also don't have the additional contributions that's added. Some agencies still pay the employee portion of the cost. Now, are they heading in that direction to adjust that? I think they are.
And some agencies are also participating in Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both.
Some jurisdictions haven't touched anything.
Right. And so that's where you get where people want to go there because their benefit is higher than others. Like,
What has been our experience recently? Have we lost a lot of folks or not?
It's largely on the public safety side that our concerns
Right.
are. That's the ones that rotate through. And it's really not the biggest driving factor. Our pay is, we try and keep it average in a good mix of PERSable and non-PERSable type benefits for public safety, pensionable, I guess, benefits. The larger issue for our public safety is what they do and the type of community that they work in. Some folks, the younger ones will come here, new recruits rather, will come here and expect that they're gonna get out and do stuff, and it's not the same. They encounter the same people, just not at the same rate. And so they may want to transition out, train here for a couple of years and then leave. But your longer term staff will sit here a while. Once they've been here 8, 9, 10 years, they recognize the benefits of working in a community like Atherton.
I think that most jurisdictions that are similar to Atherton, they have the same issues.
Yeah.
So we're not unique in that sense.
yeah, and what's changed is the PEPRA has changed also. So anybody that's new employees are under the new plan, PEPRA
Right.
plan. So that's what is a big factor as well.
I have several questions, if I may.
Yeah.
Did you say that the investment return for CalPERS for 2017 was 8-point-something%?
8.6%. For 17-18 was 8.6%. For fiscal year 16-17, it was 11.2%.
Okay.
And the year before that, I think it was 0.61.
Okay, because they don't have the 2018 number on the website yet.
No, but
But the 11.2, yeah, so okay,
mhm.
that's one question.
Yeah.
Another question, maybe George can answer this. In 2013, approximately, prior to that, our financial statements and our CalPERS reports showed the funding ratios in two ways: a market value basis and an actuarial value basis. And they've conveniently thrown away the actuarial value basis. It's no longer reported anywhere. which seems to tell me that while for our liabilities, they use assumptions that involve inflation and blah, 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 but for our asset valuation, they give us no credit for future earnings at any rate. Am I right?
Oh, that sounds right. Yeah.
Well, then we're that's not right.
That's CalPERS.
Yeah. And I think that the reason why they changed it, that was the first thing was changed before they did the rate smoothing policy, was every agency was going over the actual valuation as the value, but then when they started implementing the whole pension liability component on the financial statements, they started basing it off of the market value of what.
I know what they did, but I don't see how they can give your assets zero credit for increases in value.
I'm not sure I understand, I'm sorry.
Well, because they're forcing us to fund with no credit for increases in value, it appears to me.
They don't take the plan asset value and then allocate it out by agency somewhere in the actuarial?
No, they do that, but what I'm getting at is, and I may be wrong, and that's why it's a question. When they gave us credit for actuarial value of the assets, it was a bigger number because it assumed some growth at some percentage rate, 7%, I think. Now they don't give us credit for any growth in the value of the assets. Now it's accounted for at some point each year when they redo the actual rate of return is factored in.
It's factored in. It'll be factored into our rates and our UAL payment. So maybe our UAL payment should have gone up $300,000 next year. Once they factor in the new rate, what we received in the investment rate return, maybe it's only $220,000 that we pay. They do factor that in.
That's that last little thing you were trying to go through here.
Right.
It still seems to me that it's not right, and that there should be a point where we reach, in theory, where we're grossly overfunded. I mean, we would cease to fund at some point because they wouldn't wait till after the fact. I don't even think CalPERS would do that, but
You mean grossly overfunded from a year-to-year basis?
No.
Or cumulatively?
Cumulatively. Because we're projecting liabilities with all kinds of increases factored in, and we're projecting the growth of our assets with no growth factored in. I may be wrong about that, but unless it's somewhere else, I can't find it.
I think it's intuitively adjusted into UAL adjustment every year, but you'd have to check for us, Robert.
Yeah, it's adjusted in the UAL, and then also up into what they show up to 23, 24. That's the ramp up component, that 5-year ramp up. After that, then it should.
But the 5 years, they're taking investment gains and losses and average them over 5 years. So I understand it. They're trying to avoid huge jumps. I understand that. But I'll move on to another question because I don't think we're going to resolve that right now. If you look at the participant data in the reports, so for example, if you're in the CalPERS Safety Actuarial Report and you go to page 18 and it lists participants and they're categorized: active, transferred, separated, and retired. I think I know what active is, but I'm not, and I think I know what retired is. Although retired could be retired with various levels of benefits, I presume. What are transferred and separated exactly? How do you get? Does that mean transferred in or transferred out, or what does that mean?
Is it transferred to? I think these are both. Can be transferred to another agency, meaning they're still within the system, but now they're at another agency.
Not retired from the town, but
Right,
still.
they're not retired from the town, but we still have to pay a portion of the time that they were here, is what they're calculating.
So they're gone,
Oh.
okay?
We will always pay a portion of the person's time here based on, that's the total calculation that you'll get at the end of when they retire. They say if they worked at Millbrae for 10 years, this is what their calculation, if they worked.
Yeah, but in theory, if you had no unfunded actuarial liability at the time they left, you wouldn't owe them a dime after they
Correct.
left.
The way the CalPERS system works, I work here for 5 years and I'm paid $200,000 a year. I go work for another CalPERS agency and actually retire at $250K. When I retire at $250K, my time of service here is at that $250K.
Oh, jeez.
So I am paid
They get you coming and
for
going.
pension, then the town's pension liability increases.
I got it.
Yeah.
That's helping me understand some of these other numbers I've
Yeah.
looked at. And
So
what
it's
is,
been separated. Does that mean they went out of the system entirely?
Yes.
Yes.
So we no longer are paying for them? Or,
just
Well,
like-
we no longer, we pay up to a point
To
of
when they
that
left.
we're here,
yeah, okay.
but they're separated, means when they retire, there could be a calculation.
They're not collecting benefits yet.
Right.
okay. So,
And then I think page 9 of the report will kind of, I think it sums up like how the net gains and losses on your previous question, on how it gets adjusted.
now I messed up all my papers, but hold on.
So page 9 of each report will kind of explain how they do the asset gains and losses, and they come up with what the new UAL payment will be.
Well, page 9 tells you how you get to an unfunded balance. It doesn't really give you the details of the calculation, because that doesn't get you to the 295, 438. I don't think. I didn't test the math, but. At any rate,
Did they tell us what happens when they lower to 20 years? Is that projection that'll be effective?
It's gonna be in the fiscal year 2018 valuation, the next one that we come up.
So I went back, because I have all this stuff going back to 2011. So in 2011, we had an unfunded liability of 10.3 million. We were 76% funded. On an actuarial basis, we were 85% funded. And we had 193 participants in the various categories, active, transferred. I figured that was interesting. From then on, not counting side fund payments, because the side fund payments, in theory, should have zeroed out our liability prior to 2003, June 30th of 2003. That's what they were for.
Yeah, they CalPERS took a moment in time and said, here's your unfunded, we'll put it over here and go forward.
Right.
And we actually, that we could pay off, this we just kept creating unfunded liability.
Well, since in the stuff I have from 2011 forward, we've always paid our normal cost, as well as any unfunded obligations that were announced to us. So sometime between 2003, all these additional liabilities have been accumulated since 2003. So anyway, going back to the 10.3 million and the 76% funding, we've made payments from, in fiscal years 2012 through fiscal year 2017. The staff report shows payments of 6.2 million. The financial statements show payments of 6.5 million, but the point is, we've thrown $6 million in the pot.
Toward the UAL or toward the
Total.
total?
Towards pension costs. So at the end of 17, we're 73% funded, but the unfunded amount has grown from 10.3 million to 15.7. Even though our assets have gone, market value of our assets has gone up from almost $11 million, from 32.6 to $43.4 million. So our liabilities went up $16 million, from 43 million to 59 million. It seems like we're chasing our tail. Liabilities up 16 million, even though the market value was up 11 million, we kicked in 6 to 6.5 million. We still increased our unfunded liability by 5.3 million. And it's going to be worse going forward because the discount rate's gone down and the amortization is now being done over 20 years. So those numbers in these reports that go out into the future, probably understated. The California Policy website says that government pension systems, not just state, but all local systems, that their contributions, annual contributions, are probably going to go from 31 billion in 2018 to almost 60 billion in 5 years. Something's wrong with these calculations.
Exactly.
So in that period of time, I think though we also need to take into account the whole 0.62 point of return. So that impacted every agency's obligation.
Say it again?
The 0.62 point return from CalPERS that one
The 1 year.
year, like 3 years back or 2 years back.
0.6, yeah,
So
in
that,
2016.
that would have had a dramatic increase on our pension liability.
Well, 15 wasn't too hot either. That was
Right,
only
right.
2.4, but, and those are spread out over 5 years. But the years before were 13.2,
Right,
18 point, you know, they tend to average out. I mean, through 2017, since inception, CalPERS has generated 8.4% return.
Right, but in terms of an immediate UAL impact, I think we would see a big jump in that period of time you were talking about because of those. When they went through a whole bunch of machinations of addressing that, changing it from a 30-year funding horizon to try and do a 5-year ramp up, then they nixed that and went to a 20-year funding horizon.
They seem to change their mind every week from what I can
And then
read.
changed the mortality rate and all of those things kind of reconfigured all of those numbers. And so I guess my point is, I think we're going to see an increase. I think it's not going to flesh itself out until another couple of years from now we start to see what that picture is. I just don't know what that is.
It's like a payday lender. It's like paying back to a payday lender.
That's what it
Yeah.
seems like.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I've experienced, but I saw on Netflix. Saw a Netflix documentary.
So, do we have an action item that you're laying on us here, Robert?
No, there's no action item, it's just a discussion, and then obviously we will have future discussion on this, on the reports as we get into the next budget cycle.
But the council, though, on the next Wednesday night's meeting, tomorrow night's meeting, is actually going to be adopting the resolution to establish that pension trust fund, but not put any money into it. Perhaps the committee might want to have a continuing conversation about when would be the right time to begin to put some money in there, and what could we look at to do that, whether we look at the volatility chart and say, well, 7% is still aggressive, we think it's more like 5%, so we'll hedge and put 2% into the side fund every year that we maintain on our own. Some sort of rationale I think the council would find helpful.
Today,
No.
in a future meeting.
Yeah.
It seems like it'll be a double whammy when the return drops.
Mhm.
People would say that there's something called like a wealth effect. It might affect the the rate presentation that Paula gave. So it'll be a double whammy. We'll have a higher liability with things like CalPERS. We might foresee a lowering, at least of the growth, if anything, of the property tax increase. It's happened before, I think, from her charts.
Right, all things to consider in that.
Yeah.
So a lot of these assumption changes are built into these valuation reports. The one that will increase in the fiscal year 2019 valuation reports will be the ramp up change discussion as far as the new amortization periods from 30 to 20.
So do we get, how does this information fit into Atherton's budget section? And so do we get this kind of information in time to put it into our budget for the next year?
Yes, like, so what they already gave us is they gave us the 1920 employer contribution rates. So
Mhm.
that'll go into the budget for public safety and miscellaneous. Those are the payroll contribution rates. And then they already gave us what the unfunded liability component will be.
Okay.
So that will be included in next year's budget. So, and it just gives us another tool to see going forward how it could change. If it's 295,000 for this coming fiscal year, the projection here shows that for 2021, for miscellaneous, it's 336,000. And it projects the employer rate cost of 11%. They kind of give us next year's what it will be, and then they'll project the next following fiscal year. And the projection will always change based off of the assumptions, how the plan did based on the investment return. So this will be incorporated into our budget.
Well, and you'll find some variation. First of all, the normal cost is percentage of payroll, and payroll changes all the time. So, but and secondly, we've been paying the unfunded liability portion as a lump sum the first year of the fiscal year, so it's a lower amount than sometimes appears in the staff reports, because the staff report starts with the number that's calculated from what it would be if you paid monthly instead of a lump sum figure.
Correct.
So
Yes.
that's why I found some numbers. I figured that part out.
And then page 3 of the staff report, that chart kind of shows you what we paid over the years prior to their UIL payment. It was all through the contribution rate through payroll. So you can kind of see, it just was just a scenario just to show you how the rates have been and what we've contributed to CalPERS in the last several years.
One of the things that's come across my desk in the last couple of days is an email conversation with Alan Entleman, who used to be a member of this committee. And he tossed the question out there, maybe the town should consider setting up a 401k plan for its employees instead of a CalPERS plan. And I know that he understands the whole termination liability issue, and that's a huge number within the CalPERS reports. But presently, CalPERS does not allow the commingling, so to speak, of plans. So we can't have some employees in a 401k and some in CalPERS. They're either all in or all out. So if we move or shift to a defined contribution benefit plan as opposed to defined benefit plan, with CalPERS, we would have to pay or do the termination liability from the CalPERS plan, which means we'd be double tracking and paying twice almost than what we pay now.
And then the termination discount rate is not 7%, it's
Yeah.
like 2%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
To
termination is kind of basically out of the question.
But no, this is just information. We'll continue to have discussions about this, and George mentioned we'll maybe begin having discussions of, do we want to maybe contribute or make a recommendation to contribute to at any future time.
But they will discuss tomorrow about opening the.
Creating that. Yeah,
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with creating it if our fiscal situation changes, we could. But these retired people don't seem to be going away very quickly.
Well,
Not in California.
In 2011, we had 91 of them, and in 2017 we have 119. So it's going the wrong direction.
Well, the thing that is going in the right direction, though, is as we hire new staff,
Right, they're
we're
under-
transitioning to PEPRA, so
Yeah.
that percentage is increasing every year.
Means we need to bottle the water and Atherton to sell it. It's the elixir.
Well,
there you go.
the actives in safety stayed about the same, I guess. Obviously, it was in the miscellaneous where there's been a dramatic change there. But, okay.
And a lot of it too, mortality, those demographic assumptions that have been changed as well. Mortality is a big factor that has changed recently, that previously it wasn't changed. It wasn't included in the evaluation reports.
Shall we move on to the next item, the last item? Next meeting date should be in January in the
Yes.
second week.
I have the second week, but I am requesting to see if we can have it. It would be January 8th. How does January 15th?
15th's better for me, I can't do the 8th.
Because the week of the 8th, there's CSFMO conference
I can do the 15th.
that I was planning, trying to attend. I've never happened to one in a couple of years.
I can do, I think I leave on the 17th. I can do it on the 15th.
I'm okay with 15.
Okay.
Did you go on the 15th? I didn't hear.
Yes, January 15th.
Okay, anything else anybody has? I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
All right.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.